There's been some movement on the United States Refugee Admissions Program called USRAP in short. Uh, what we need to understand is that Trump, on January 20th, his first day in office, suspended this program and basically said, we're going to suspend that specific USRAP program as a way to bring refugees in. As part of that executive order suspending that program, he basically said he's going to take all refugees on a case by case basis and left it up to the executives in his cabinet to decide case by case rather than having a program that mass brought people into the United States. One of the reasons this happened is, and the repercussions of that are coming right now, is that Biden had used this program as a general way to import people into the United States. How he did this was, rather than change the law or definition of what a refugee was by going through Congress to change that law, he did an executive order attempting to change the regulations, stating that there's such a thing as a climate refugee because of the significant climate change. If a country claimed to have significant climate change and wanted refugees to leave that country and come to the United States, that was a good enough reason to come here. And the second thing Biden didn't do in importing all of the people he brought under the USRAP program was he didn't really track well exactly why they were coming or how they were coming and what their refugee status was based on. And so we have no idea what the refugee status was based on. What we know is under the USRAP program, Biden brought in 200,000 people for various reasons. Some of them was this new climate change rule that he created that has nothing to do with the law of refugees and what refugees actually are and what refugee status should be. Because of this, what hit the news recently is that Trump has decided to review all 200,000 of those refugee status applications during the Biden years and determine whether or not they actually should or did have refugee status at the time they came under the law, rather than under this rule that Biden created under his own by executive order. So that's what's going on here. You're going to see the news talking about, well, all 200,000 of these people have gone through really big background checks and security checks before bringing them in, some of the best security checks ever. And that may or may not be true. But the problem is the review that's happening right now has nothing to do with their security checks or their background checks. They could be completely secure, completely background appropriate, and still fail to meet the definition of refugee under the refugee laws and regulations. Trump just doesn't get to remake the rules and say, we're going to create a new classification and allow anybody in the country that has bad weather in their country. So that's what's going on here. And so this USRAP was suspended on January 20th. There was a lawsuit about it, and anybody that had already received refugee status and had already had travels plans to come to the United States under refugee status, there is an injunction, and those few people that were under that status were allowed to come. Other than that, all refugees that were scheduled to come, all of that's been stopped. No, nobody's coming. They're going to have to resubmit refugee paperwork under proper rules, not under Biden's rules, under the laws, and resubmit the paperwork properly and go through the proper refugee status in order to get in. And so that's what's going on here. I mean, we have the State Department going through all statuses. Biden was trying to let 200,000 at least every year in, and he didn't have a maximum number of people in. We've reduced that for 2026 down to 7,500 people. Is what expected to be allowed in under refugee status. I mean, that could change if there was some major event that caused that to have to change, but we don't expect that to happen. One of the things that happened is some of these are refugees that came into the country had already been refugees from their own country and were already in safe havens. So rather than leave them in their safe haven that they were refugee from once they left their own country, we allowed them to move and gave them refugee status to leave a place that was already safe and they already had refugee status and come to the United States instead. Well, that is not the purpose of our refugee program. Our refugee program is to safeguard people and to make sure they have a safe place. If they've already been safeguarded and have a safe place, there's no reason to remove them from their safe place to the United States. And so that's what a lot of these are, and all those look like they're going to be rejected. Then a lot of these other ones are climate refugees, which there's no such thing as a climate refugee. You don't just get to skip countries because the weather is bad in your own country. We are not doing economic and climate refugees at this point in the United States. There's no law that says that can be done, and despite Biden's numerous executive orders to the contrary, the President of the United States doesn't get to determine the definition of refugee as it relates to our laws and our regulations. So Trump has undone all of those executive orders and basically said we're going back to the legal definition of refugee, and if you don't meet that definition, please leave our country. And we're going to review all 200,000 cases and see whether or not you meet the definition of refugee. If you don't, you're going to be invited to leave the country, as it should be. Don't abuse our refugee system just to try and make a better life for yourself. I don't regret people making a better life for themselves. Everybody wants to come to the United States, but let's use the proper standard for coming here. Let's use the proper immigration system. Let's not abuse the refugee system. Let's not abuse the asylum system. Let's not abuse all of these systems that are put in place for emergencies, have been used to bring millions of people into the United States that just shouldn't be here under our normal immigration laws. And that has to be weeded out. These people need to go back to their own countries and come the legal way. And when they come here, be a positive to society, be able to hold down a job, and be able to do the things that we want immigrants to be able to do when they get here. There's no reason we should be bringing in millions of people just to put them on our welfare rolls, subsidize their housing, subsidize their food, and allow them to live off of our government welfare program for the rest of their lives by bringing them into our country. That is not the purpose of our asylum or our refugee program. If those things need to be undone because of where it's at, then it needs to be undone. The second thing that's happening here is the issue of this USRAP program and the issue of Somalians that have, in Minnesota, that have abused government welfare and stolen over $2.5 million of American funds and siphoned it off through political campaigns and through companies and basically stolen all sorts of money. These two things are being conflated. They really have very little to do with each other. There are 430 or so, maybe, Somalians that are here under the USRAP program during the past 4 Biden years, and so those 430 may end up having to leave the country, but that's the bulk of the problem with the Somalian people and the people that are stealing is that they can lose their status as green card holders if they're caught taking advantage of that program where they stole from our country, and they can actually, there's a method if they have been recently naturalized to lose their citizenship and to be removed from our country. There's no reason why we should be allowing immigrants that came here, even if they came here legally under proper refugee status, to stay in our country and benefit from our country if they're going to be improperly stealing benefits from our country and making themselves wealthy at the cost of the American taxpayer. So that's a separate issue from the 200,000 people that are going to be reviewed. The two are again being conflated in the liberal press, but they're two separate issues. So when we get down to, the federal government is going to investigate all of this theft that occurred under Tim Walz in Minnesota of our national resources around the COVID and around the COVID funds and all the theft that occurred throughout Minnesota under his watch. And if it is foreign citizens that took advantage of that, even if they're green card holders and maybe even if they're now citizens, we're going to look at not only jailing them for the term of years, usually 10 years for the welfare fraud that they committed, for the fraud of the government that they committed, but after that 10 years, they're going to be removed from our country and should be. There's no reason why we should allow this kind of abuse from foreign citizens that come here just to steal and pillage our system and to take from our taxpayers funds that were meant for the betterment of all of us. And so that's going to be a totally separate issue, but both are getting conflated. So on the one hand, Trump under USARP is reviewing 200,000 people that came under refugee status because we don't know why they're here, and if they do not have proper refugee status, they will be removed. And then the second thing that's happening is we're reviewing all of these Somalians that did steal or may have stolen and fraudulently took money under the COVID money and post-COVID money that should not have received those funds and enriched themselves through that. And any of those may also be removed and even may lose their citizenship. At the very least, they need to be prosecuted and put in federal prison for a term of years. So hopefully all that helps you understand it better, what's going on. And I look forward to helping you understand better the situation under the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program and where that's going in the near future under Trump. It wouldn't surprise me if it's just eliminated and we give refugee status back to the Secretary of State and the State Department to decide refugee status. We don't really need a separate department separate from the State Department deciding refugee status. We can do what in the olden days was done and have the State Department do all of the background checks and refugee status on their own. and without all this headache of having a bureaucracy that is attempting to do what they can to increase the number of refugees beyond what is necessary beneficial for our country. So hopefully all that helps you understand, and we'll talk about it again soon, I'm sure, because this is going to keep hitting